introducing myself. That will make everybody sit down and be quiet because you wouldn't want to be rude. My name is Liat. I'm an innovation consultant and I specialize in scaling and AI. And thus I'm very excited to be moderating this panel. We have a nice and intimate panel today. It's all about the quality, not the quantity. So our first panelist, I'm going to sit, I don't know why I'm standing. Our first panelist is Tamer Farag from Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, who's I'm going to say expert on private sector partnerships. We have in the middle Bernhard Kovac, who leads the innovation accelerators at the UN World Food Programme. And we have Stephanie Kiyutsukis, who's the CEO of Fresh Strategy and expert in innovation and AI. And the reason we're here today is because obviously, well, it's the reason everybody's in Davos, right? The world has very big problems and we're trying to solve them with the limited resources that we saw in the previous panel. And we want to figure out what we can do as the world is getting more and more complex to solve these problems faster and more efficiently. And what does it take? So I'll ask a few questions to our panelists. I hope we have a good discussion. And then I'm going to open also to the audience to hear from you. So please pay attention to what we're talking about because I'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts about it later. And particularly what kind of actions you think you could take following this line of discussion. So I'm going to start with a lightning round. And maybe I'll start from this way. And I would like each of you to answer the mandatory question, the others won't be mandatory, about where do you see the greatest opportunity in scaling impact in this age of increasing interconnectedness and very quick change?
Sure. So, hello? Okay. So I work at Gavi. Actually, just finished my second month. So hence the notebook, need some reminders. Let me tell you something about Gavi. Gavi itself is an innovative business model. The purpose of Gavi is to get vaccines to people who need them the most but can afford them the least. So we do demand aggregation. And in doing so, we're able to provide vaccines at massive scale and for prices that make sense for low and middle income countries. The two ingredients here that are really important are consensus building. We're an alliance. It's a public-private alliance that includes the WHO, UNICEF, the Gates Foundation, other donors, vaccine manufacturers. We have a governance structure. We sort of do the hard work up front to build trust and consensus. And the other part of this that's important is the scale at which we operate. What that's enabled us to do is to provide these vaccines at very favorable prices, and we've been able to vaccinate over 1 billion children since we started, saving 18.8 million lives. And of interest to WEF, that's resulted in $250 billion in economic benefits in the countries where we operate. So I think the secret or one tool that we have at our disposal for scaling is to work with organizations like Gavi. There are other organizations, a couple of them besides Gavi, but we're working in countries. We have the scales, we have the financial innovation, and we've been pushing innovation into those markets and seeing them go to scale. So that's my plea and answer to that question.
Yeah, thank you. Bernhard.
So maybe for those of you who don't know what the World Food Programme is, it's a United Nations agency. Whenever you hear the UN delivers food in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Sudan, or Venezuela, it's the World Food Programme. But we don't only deliver food, we also work on sustainably ending hunger. And so my day job is to actually, I'm running the innovation accelerator, startup accelerator, so focusing on innovation, non-profits, internal innovation, and for-profit startups or companies, and help them scale, either make emergency response more efficient and effective, or sustainably ending hunger. So I'm coming at this from the angle of we heard this before, so what can we actually invest in? What can we do more, right, in philanthropy? I would see myself in a similar fashion on the intersection of that, where, to your point about what is going to scale, I think we have a lot of opportunities in front of us, like where we combine technology with real problems. And like what I mean is that there's a sweet spot between like trying to tackle things that really will make a difference and technology, whether that's AI, blockchain, Web3, whatever it actually is. And it's an interesting aspect because it's not just that AI will solve everything just because it's AI. It's you have to merge it with big problems.
So, and we work with various types of organizations. One type of organization are development agencies, and we help them scale up their programs. So they do a lot of pilots in the field, and these pilots work. But what's next? Investing another round into these ventures or these organizations that is supporting through their funding is sometimes difficult to achieve, but they still need to make the most out of the resources that they put out there. Ultimately, I think one of the key barriers that we've seen, most recently especially, is that the resources are very, very scarce. Money is scarce, but also time is scarce. People within the organizations, people on the field, don't really have the time to invest into learning how to scale up organizations, how to scale up programs, how to scale up things that work. So ultimately, I think one of the key challenges of our time is how do we make the most of the things that have proven to be working, and how do we scale them up? Because the solutions, I would assume, are already out there. And I think technology will help us on achieving a lot or resolving a lot of these issues.
Thank you. I think the diversity in your answers very much reflects my experience with scaling, which is scaling can mean so many things, and that's kind of what makes it difficult. And there are so many different ways to approach it. And maybe I can start by being nice and asking for examples of successful scaling projects. And afterwards, we'll talk about less nice things. But what has worked? What kind of, I mean, with Gavi, as you mentioned, the whole thing is one big scale up, right? But I would love to hear some specific examples of scale-ups that you've managed to really move the needle with them. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so we maintain a portfolio of innovators that we fund, and we focus on funding for vaccine delivery. The rest of Gavi is focused, you know, the pharmaceutical industry innovates. We've sort of figured out how to get vaccines at the right prices. The part that we need to work on, we feel as a priority, is our delivery challenges. And so the one innovator that I'd like to highlight that we have quite a long history with and is sort of on the verge of reaching this critical mass and scale is Zipline, the drone delivery solution. It's you know, somewhat of a simple concept, but it turns out rather audaciously that if you use drones to deliver vaccines and medical supplies, you can cut down on stockouts dramatically. In clinics where Zipline operates, there's a 42% reduction in missed vaccine doses. We started working with them in 2016 in Rwanda, and their operations have now expanded to Ghana and Nigeria and Kenya also. I think you asked also what was unexpected about this. I think something really key is the passion and vision of the founder. So that's something that we look for a lot. We look for founders who are real believers in delivering these kinds of products and services to developing countries, because we look for the best and the brightest. And the truth is that they can go and make tons of money somewhere else, but they have to really believe. And that's we're fortunate that we have quite a number like that we work with.
So if I chime in on that, like and I'm answering this from perspective of a lot of different programs. So we actually started running accelerator programs also in partnerships or service, like, you know, with the German government, like the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Gates Foundation, Google. So like then on different impact causes, actually, like also primary healthcare, gender equality, climate action, like different aspects. And so what we typically do is like, so we have a kind of an earlier stage program where we also like have a kind of a 1 week acceleration phase, which we call Innovation Bootcamp with a pitch event. And then we have the teams essentially co-develop their solution wherever they are, you know, with World Food Programme country offices and partners to actually really develop these solutions with the people that are the users or that are being served through these solutions. And the reason why I'm saying this is we're in the, you know, the scaling program then is dedicated again, like focusing on the critical challenges, what they need to help them scale. So that can actually be very individual. So for some of them it might be team building, for some of them it might be fundraising and partnerships, for some of them it might be technology development, right? And just to, I'll give you two quick different examples. Like one internal innovation that we've been building is a solution we call Building Blocks. It's actually using blockchain wallets so that refugees and hungry people can go into stores, purchase food. We're actually now using this in Ukraine as a identity and deduplication mechanism. So it's used by 60 different UN entities and NGOs, where the same person goes to, let's say, to UNHCR, to Oxfam to Save the Children, then the system will flag, well, wait a second, this family already got support from the other NGO, so you shouldn't double fund them. So by doing this, we actually were able to avoid $180 million of unintended transfers that didn't happen, right? So like you essentially $180 million of efficiency gains, so to provide support to more people. But then maybe to give you an example on a startup more, where it's like we've been supporting a startup called Ignitia. So it's a Swedish, African, West African startup that actually they use AI and satellite imagery to develop localized weather models for rural parts of Africa. And what's exciting about this, it's really about, they've thought about this both from like a local element and from the AI model, where they bring together like, you know, cutting edge AI. So their model is about 80% better than global models in weather. And then if the farmers don't have smartphones, they send them text message. And if they can't read and write, they get symbols. And the symbol will say, storm is coming, harvest now, plant seeds now. So what they've just done, they've essentially expanded precision agriculture to potentially people who cannot even read and write in rural parts of Africa. And I think this is where I see a lot of the sweet spot, specifically with startups, where you combine like the aspect of like maybe there's some smartness in terms of like the technology play, but also be really rooted in the local adaptation. Because like, you know, if you're a tech founder from Switzerland or from Germany or from the US, maybe you don't think about like, you know, the realities of people on, you know, in the global south. But like combining those two aspects, I think that's really one of the sweet spots.
So we come from a little bit of a different direction, because we don't run programs like you do, but we tend to actually support the startups or the organizations that participate in your programs, right? And so what we see is when I work with those organizations directly, the first thing they tell me is, I need money. And once I have the money, I'll achieve all the results that you see here on this chart. And Elena mentioned it before. The curve always looks like that, hockey stick. I'm going to reach 1 million people within no time. I'm going to resolve this issue in whatever, few months, right from now. The reality is, though, or the real question they need to be asking themselves is, well, once I have the money, what is the next problem that I need to resolve? And often we see what you're saying. It is the team, right? Lack of capabilities within the team. A lot of the people that we work with, they are tech startups. They're spin-offs from ETH universities. So they know a lot about the technology. They know a lot about how to develop products, to develop solutions, how to also maybe convince investors. However, when it comes to the process of achieving or developing an organization that will be self-sustaining in the long run, this is where I see there is a big, big need in terms of capability building.
Thank you. I think what you described just now sounded all like projects that take many, many years, which is reasonable. I mean, you mentioned 2016, right, with Zipline, and you also mentioned innovators that you're supporting, which obviously is many years projects. And I'm wondering if you could share any examples of sort of quick wins or little shortcuts that you've managed to found. We call them smart moves, right? Something that was surprisingly cheap or easy to implement and managed to make a bigger difference. Not a mandatory question if you don't have one.
No, so I'm actually going to misbehave, and I'm going to say that I think the most impactful things there isn't a shortcut for. And in particular, it's to take the time to work, to echo Stephanie's point, to work with in-country innovators, because they're always going to be several steps ahead in terms of understanding the problem space and coming up with solutions for them. And then with our access, we can pair them with, we know from AI, those of you who have worked in the AI space, the quality of the work, the technical aptitude, it makes a huge difference in the kind of results you can get. And that's not available everywhere, right? It's getting increasingly more common, but it's still not around everywhere. So we pair them with in-country innovators. And going back then to Gavi's whole business model, which is to partner with countries and to build that consensus. We put that effort, it was incredible. I can only imagine what it was like to actually do that work. A partnership of all those organizations, which are all notoriously kind of hard to work with. And it's been successful. So when we put that work in up front, then we make everything else so much easier. And I just, again, to emphasize that it's the in-country innovators who have the answers, and we need to be accessing them and working with them.
I think the question is like is a rabbit hole. I mean, I can talk about this like for hours probably. But like the interesting question there is like, so when you have a startup, you need one person that's able to build the product, one person that's able to sell, right? Now, if you're having both, that's great. Now the challenge really is like, you also have to remind yourself that like if 90% of startups fail, then maybe there's the odd startup that will have like this kind of growth hack or this opportunity to grow a little faster. I would say, to answer your question though, I think really one of the key success factors, like either you have a really great talent, whether it's in the technology that is scaling, or you're great at selling or having partnerships, that like you have like what could be a secret superpower for a startup, right? Like you could actually be one of them, like that says, you work with a partner. Like actually, if startups come in our program, so Ignitia, for instance, we help them expand in Ghana and in Mali. Now they're in 11 countries in Africa. How do we do that? Because we're a UN entity, and like we open doors and we can introduce them to the Minister of Agriculture, right? Now that is something. Have we been helping them in growing? Yes, but why? Because they have a solution that actually works and it solves a real problem, right? So I think I would say, as soon as if you can accelerate learning and if you accelerate kind of having this product market fit in the first place, once you have that, then you can go into growing. And then I think the inherent challenge when we talk global south and like developing countries, that's where it's harder, because like if you're in the US, you just grow in the US. You have like 300+ million customers potentially. If you are in one country, let's say you're a startup in Ghana, you want to expand in Kenya, it's a lot harder to do this, which is like hundreds of kilometers away, different country, different legislation. So I wouldn't so saying it's possible, but it's hard.
Sorry, though, you did admit, that that as the UN you do have the potential to, for example, make these introductions that would shortcut and help that scaling, but of course it's still a long way.
If they solve a real problem, right? Like, and I think this is also where, I mean, talking about partnerships, there's like we need to leverage each other's like secret superpowers and strength, right? Like as World Food Programme has operations in 120 countries and territories. So literally in any one of those countries, I have colleagues that work with the government, the communities, the private sector, to make sure that we're actually getting like helping people. So that's something we can offer as an accelerator. Now, same thing, if you have a private investor or if you have a foundation, you have other aspects and other strengths that you have, right?
I think one of the keys to actually scaling is to have a very, very clear vision of what it means that you want to achieve. What is it, your end goal? Is it going to be, I don't know, saving 100 people's life in a little village somewhere? Or is it going to change a system? And given that goal, that will make will change what you do, what the actions are that you will entail. It will completely change your attitude towards achieving this end goal. Now, I think this is one of the things that I find is lacking in all the organizations we work with, which we see maybe in a lot of the, let's say, Anglo-Saxon tech startups. They have very, very bold objectives. But do all these social entrepreneurs have sufficiently bold objectives? Here is where I would challenge people to actually try to imagine more and then, as a consequence, commit to more and do more.
Thank you. And talking about, you were talking about what was lacking in many companies that you work with. The next question is a bit cheeky, and if nobody chooses to answer it, that's fine. But I would love to hear if you have any stories of failure of scale-up. Now, the reason I'm asking about this is because we all know that if we want to innovate, we need to fail, and nobody can innovate without failing. But it's very, very hard to admit that we failed, especially in front of an audience. So there's two options. Either some of you will want to tell a failure story, or this will be my personal failure story. So does anybody have a failure story to share? Yes, excellent, thank you.
So I'll try to do this dramatically for the benefit of the audience that may be flagging a bit. This is a tale of two companies. One is for-profit, and the other was a non-profit. Both were working in the AI vaccine delivery space. The for-profit one was doing well, seemed to be on a path to scale, but then they found a niche area that was much more profitable, and they shuttered their work in vaccine delivery and moved into that space. And so, you know, for their owners and shareholders, they're doing exactly what they need to do. But it's not working for us. All the effort we put into it was you could say, wasted. The other company, set up as an NGO, is still operating in this space, but they have sustainability issues. They're having trouble finding the funding they need to keep going. So this is why we're very interested in scale. We're interested in joining up with other organizations. Bernard, I just from sitting here next to you and hearing you talk, I think we should definitely meet and have a brainstorming session. And this is to plea to all of you. You know, there's kind of a market problem when it comes to public health and government buyers, and it's something that we really need to solve. But it's not going to be just us. It's going to take people who go to WEF to help us solve these problems.
So I want to say, like, it is actually interesting because failure, it's what you define as a failure, right? Like, depending on where you draw the line, right? Right now, so by the end of 2023, our portfolio of innovations, they reached a total of 60 million people, and they raised $295 million in addition to what we gave them in terms of grant funding and support and so on, right? So which actually goes to show, like, overall portfolio, great, right? Now, if you look into like the individual numbers, you realize that this is driven by individual innovations and startups that are very successful versus others are not as successful. Now, you could actually go as far as saying like all of those that are not very successful are a failure. But I think for me, like the only failures are the ones where, you know, the founders give up. A lot of the other startups, you know, you'll go through the roller coaster, and then, you know, the question is like, do you give up when you're on the bottom? Or do you keep going? And sometimes it just takes longer. And we've seen this time and time again, where it's like, you know, maybe a startup is going like, you know, okay, and then all of a sudden they realize, okay, they find something or they work on something. I mean, which goes back to the story about, yes, you need the founders, you need the founding teams, right? Where if the founding team is good, they will find this. They will be working on like finding what actually makes them successful.
Great. I love that about that it's only a failure if the founder gives up. I think I'm going to write that somewhere because it's true for everything in life. I love it. Yes, Stephanie?
Yeah, so I think I would like to second you on it. What is a failure really? Ultimately, if you define your own objective and your objectives are very, very low, then you're never going to fail. Of course, you're going to achieve them. And then if you're satisfied with that, and that is your the vision of how your company, organization should function, then that's okay. However, the problems that are out there are very, very big. And we're here to resolve those problems. And this is what drives me, at least. How do we resolve big issues in global health, in the climate change, in other areas? And ultimately, that requires that we create solutions that get adopted by people. And when I say that, I mean not only people who would buy, use, I don't know, an app, a product, something like that, but also think beyond users or beneficiaries, maybe also solutions that get adopted by governments and institutionalized. Because this is when we are achieving real scale, and this is when we are achieving also real impact at the end of the day, when something becomes the new normal.
Excellent. I think I will ask just one last question before I go to the audience. And what I'm really hoping from this conversation, even though the room has thinned out a bit, we still have quite a lot of people. And what I'm hoping is that beyond just ideas and insight, that we could also kind of identify people who could help each other out. And my last question is indeed about that. It's about partnership. So what do you think your organization needs, or what do you think is needed more in general? Who do we need, and what do we need them to do? And the reason I'm asking it also like that is because in this audience there may be those kind of people with whom we could have a dialogue. Anyone can go first, or I could pass on to the audience.
I mean, let's say the interesting question, like maybe, because I get this question a lot, is like, so why do you run accelerator programs for other like governments, agencies, like foundations and stuff? Like, it actually comes from the impact aspect. So we realize, so we're actually trying to open source everything we do, like, so, you know, like the methods as much as we can. Now, the challenge, what we realized is it's kind of like, there isn't enough people that actually do this. Now, I think it's a lot better now than it was like 5 years ago, than it was 10 years ago. And there's also not enough funders that actually are like willing or interested in like specifically some of this, you know, whether you take like impact investing or whether you take like early stage startups or like innovative NGOs. Like, I think there's a lot of need to, you know, I think do a lot more of that. Now, and part of that is also like how we can get better together, or like get the right people together. So like maybe there's a funder, somebody who's working on innovation, somebody who actually has a problem, and sometimes being smarter about how to get together. I've been having this conversation earlier today where it's like with an insurance company where it's like, okay, well, they could actually sponsor a program where it's an insurance we will do with smaller farmers, so that actually funds a program. So, you know, so it's not just linear in terms of like you give me funding, then we do, right? I think we actually need to be open and really think about, you know, also like just to say, like, of course, if anybody wants to give me cash to help more startups and help them actually reach more people, happy. I can also offer to, like, you know, share, do more, get people together. And I think, you know, sessions like this, and so great, thank you for getting us together here, is like, I think it's great. Let's just talk about, like, and sometimes it might be you want to volunteer in an accelerator program. You want to volunteer, help a startup that is close to your heart, right? Like, these are the types of things maybe that will make the difference for the startup to, you know, help millions of people, right?
I think what I heard earlier from you, Bernhard, actually, is that it's not only the fastest growing companies that are the ones with the largest potential that should be supported. Actually, when people like you run accelerator programs, you get a lot of applications, I assume. We do design and run an accelerator program for the Swiss government, and there we get a lot of applications. At the end of the day, there's 3 organizations that win a prize. But what happens to the other 100 that were shortlisted? Why didn't anyone support them? Who knows you're betting on the right horse? I think one of the things I'd like to see is that we focus our attention also on how can we best use technologies to help also those other 100 participants, the ones that don't get the funding or the awareness from an accelerator program and win ultimately the prize. So what we've been doing and experimenting with lately is also using AI instruments to coach all these other organizations at scale through an AI-based advisor, and take them through the process of what is the problem they're trying to solve, what is the solution that matches that problem, and also ultimately how do they best scale up and develop a vision to actually scale their organization.
So maybe just to say, like, this is also an important point where, you know, a lot of the startups that will come, they will apply because of the funding, but everybody needs funding, right? Like I don't want to say, like, I don't want to diminish this, right? But like a lot of the startups, what will make the difference and move the needle is sometimes, you know, them working on their product, them thinking about what are the critical problems that they need to fix in their startup, so that then they will be successful. And you know, in our case, like, we're trying to also coach them and work with them on these types of things in the accelerator program. But like, it's a side benefit, including like we force people to pitch, we train them how to pitch their solutions properly, which again, unfortunately, like, I mean, you were mentioning this before, like a lot of startup founders in the impact space, they're too humble, or they feel like, well, I shouldn't be pitching like too aggressively because like it's about helping people. And it's like, well, but if you're not telling the story, you won't be successful, right?
I like this idea of no startup left behind, right? Maybe there isn't enough money for everyone, but there could be other things. So I'd like to open now to the audience.
Could I just say a
word?
word?
Yes, excuse me. Go ahead.
So I think something we see is there's a ton of fragmentation in this space. Someone earlier was giving an example of you could sell to the U.S. market and set up one business development sales team speaking one language, and you're done. Or you can try to do it in sub-Saharan Africa with 40 different teams speaking 12 different languages, and just no startup will ever attempt that. On the other side, our two institutions and others are trying similar things, and we're investing in different companies, and to some extent that's good because now you have variety, and you know, you'll have some stronger, you know, the stronger will survive. But there probably isn't enough kind of capital in that space really to sustain them when we're oftentimes working towards the same end. So I would love to see more partnership and collaboration within the INGO and donor sector.
Yeah. So I will open to the audience, but I have a few guidelines, though you're welcome to speak of whatever you want. You're welcome to ask a question based on what you heard. You're very welcome to talk about actions that you think you would like to do related to this. So if you have an idea, if you want to meet someone, if you want to partner with someone, if there's something you're going to start tomorrow and you just need X. And the final thing is I would love to hear if we have any people from the corporate sector here today, because they are definitely a quite important partner into this. Yes, please just introduce yourself briefly before you speak.
My name's James Fraser. I'm the CEO of an organization called Maduro. So we're a philanthropic impact fund, very much like the Leah Foundation. And I don't actually have a question, but I have I want to tell a story, I guess, about how relationships work to get something to scale. So I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, we invested in a company called Signalytic, which is a technology that allows for data connectivity in very rural and remote areas. And on their technology, they have a blockchain-like software that compresses the data, encrypts the data, and is able to then transmit the data to a central server. So you can have, you know, facilities on the border of South Sudan. If you know what that means, it means you're in the middle of nowhere, and it works like 98% of the time it's up. So we made an investment in Signalytic, then got a call from Alea Foundation to talk about how great they are, and they were great, and they still are great. And so they made an investment. So we're both on their board. Alea and us, we work very, very hard to support the management team to then help them raise more funds, etc. So when they started, I don't know, I think they might have had 25 boxes in the field in Uganda when we first engaged with them. Now, do you know how many they have? You probably don't. They have hundreds of boxes in the field now. And then more recently, they became part of the Gavi Infuse program. And so what that did was they went from a scrappy little startup with some seed round investment to now having the imprimatur of Gavi and actually real opportunities. And so the benefit of the technology is not only will they get commodities data, but they can also do like Internet of Things connections to vaccine fridges, et cetera. So now that they're at that point, so the next role will be like, 1,000 boxes through the Global Fund or something like that. But it's a really a long process. I would also say that the management teams have to be really scrappy and not give up. It's really, really important. But I just wanted to highlight kind of how it bounces from one level to the other, and it's by collaboration between organizations like ours. So thanks.
And if it hadn't been for your investment, they might not have been around for us to invest in. So, yeah, cool.
Yeah, great story. It really speaks to the layers of network that you need to really make something happen. Thank you. Yes.
I like to... Hey, yeah. We will collaborate with Signalytic. It's a nice bridge, actually. My name is Nick Versteden. I'm founder and CEO of Goal3. We make a patient monitoring platform for health facilities in Africa. I really like the words of you, Stephanie, regarding ambition. My experience is quite counterintuitive to that because I'm relentlessly ambitious and I'm forced to trim down my plans, to trim down where we're going. There's nobody standing beside me. How are we actually going to scale this? We're making amazing impact on a per unit basis. And what I actually experienced from the impact investment space is that, you didn't tick this box yet. It didn't tick this box yet. And it's not actually a conversation, okay, now how are we going to tick that box? Because I'm aware local revenue is one of the things we need to tackle, right? We want a service model so that it can be embedded locally, so that donors help to get the initial steps, basically help to get the scale, help to drive down cost. But it's not part of the conversation. It's not like the funders I'm talking with do not imagine where am I when I deliver this at scale across Africa. They're talking about, this might be a risk, this might be, and come back when you're there. And it's actually a big barrier for rapid scale up. Well, we do have evidence, strong evidence backing up that we're really effective.
Would you go?
No, maybe in you should talk to some of the investors here also. I think if you get actual feedback that is helping you, I think that's a gift. And a lot of people don't even bother doing this. Now, from a perspective similar where we sit as an accelerator, is every 3 months we have about 1,000 applications inbound, and we prescribe by saying we want to have open application, open innovation, so everybody can apply, right? So we actually look through all the applications. We also share pipeline with investors, so we do that. Now, a lot of I think the unfortunate truth there is a lot of times is even, and it is interesting what you were saying earlier, is we try to select the startups and the nonprofits that, as per our assessment and as per assessment with the local teams, will be possible to have the biggest impact now in our case, right? Now, this is where you might be a perfectly great startup that's on number 11 of the list, but the cutoff is 10, right? And so I think you also that's a bit of the challenge in that space, because a lot of this is again, where's the cutoff, right?
Yeah, so I think what you're describing as well is overly what do I call that? Demanding partners that request from maybe organizations that are mature like they are to deliver a due diligence process at a scale, I don't know, very, very difficult processes to go through. When we work with organizations like the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, a lot of our work is influencing them to show them and opening their eyes, saying, okay, look, these are criteria that you can apply right now at the stage of the process in order to assess this organization, and is it worth funding, is it worth helping this organization with whatever the means are. One of the means is also creating the connections, giving them access. So it's not only about money, it's also about giving access to people. We've worked with organizations most recently in the health space where the best way to help to scale them up was actually creating the connection to the Swiss embassy in Kenya. And then, things started to change, because ultimately they had the credibility to also access hospitals in Korea. They're doing a tech solution for upskilling the people working in the emergency department of the hospitals, who usually don't get any training at all, because, as you mentioned, distances are very, very long, and you can't travel for this training, and then money, of course, is scarce. So they do a platform, an AI-based platform, where these people can be upskilled, and the best way to actually help them here in that case wasn't really to give them money at that stage. It was to give them access to the market, in the sense by creating the connections and connecting the dots.
Yeah, thanks. I think this links very nicely with the first panel discussion, right, that we had about, sorry, I'm walking, that we had about the difference between the box ticking and the actual impact, right, the difference between the paperwork and what the organizations are doing. And I guess we're not going to solve that question today, but it's a very interesting discussion.
I'm Elie Bayev from Global Unity and Transformative Impact Summit. Signalytic actually spoke at Transformative Impact Summit Africa in Zanzibar in June. And so Global Unity is a network of 800 plus change makers, social entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and of course so many folks need funding. But I think in terms of that connecting of the dots to help them when funding is, they're not ripe for funding or ready for funding. One of the question we ask the most that has allowed us to serve them in other ways is, what do you need? And of course, for many, it's funding. But if you can do kind of impact cartography and map out the needs of each org, then it might be matchmaking, might be connecting a dot with another organization. And so this rather need cartography and resource cartography allows you to do matchmaking beyond just funding. Of course, funding for so many is foundational, but there are so many other needs that aren't addressed. And even when an organization, a startup, doesn't get into the accelerator, there's so much more good you could be doing by tracking what they need and identifying who else in the network might be able to serve that.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, I think it's a very interesting point, right? Like, and it's like, I know it's also hard, because like, I mean, I started a startup myself, so like went into an accelerator program, which was plug and play. Like, why did we go there? Because we, you know, funding, network, you have all these things that you think you're gonna get, and then there's the stuff you actually get. And like the interesting thing is, like, from experience, like seeing hundreds of startups, also like hundreds of startups that ran through our program, it rarely was funding that actually was ever the issue. Ever. And like, and I know this is hard to hear, because like, it's like, yes, it really accelerates. If getting funding is great, but a lot of times if you then if you have product market fit and your product solves a real problem, all of a sudden you will find funding. And this is where it's a hard truth, and like this is also hard for a lot of the founders, where it's like, do you listen to, and you need to make the most of the feedback also. I should say, like, the startup I found is called Share the Meal. It's a fundraising app. I donated this to the World Food Program, so didn't get any money for that other than karma points. But like, so when we were a startup early on, like, we had two camps. One of the camps of people is like, this is like dozens or hundreds of people saying, this is the most stupid idea ever, you shouldn't be doing this. And the other camp said, that's great, nobody has ever done this before. And I mean, it was as extreme in terms of feedback. So this is where I'm saying, like, yes, and you also, even when you get feedback, you need to decide what you take from the feedback.
So we are currently coaching, I think it's 10 different organizations that are participating in the International Cooperation Award. These 10 participants come in with the ambition of getting, I think it's 50K funding that they can gain from the award. Now, when we start the coaching, or when we start collaborating with them, the first thing they ask me is, how can I get the money? What do I need to do? And I'm like, you need to think broader. It's not the money your end goal. If you want to make this work, you need to have partnerships. You need to think about what else does your organization need to get to the end objective, and then also be open to accepting those other solutions. And now you were talking about pitch training before. So we are helping them to polish the pitch for that final jury event. And clearly what we see, there are these funders or these organizations who are extremely open to accepting the feedback. They're extremely open to maybe changing the solution, because all of a sudden to them, or to it makes sense to actually talk about the benefit that they deliver differently, or even deliver a completely different solution.
If I may just say on the pitch training, that's often the thing. Like a lot of the founders will say, "My pitch is perfect. I don't need pitch training," and it's like, and I've done a TED talk, and like I've been coached to actually like do this, right? And like what I learned through this journey is like even if you think you're good, like you can accept that you can get a lot better, right? And I think if we take this mindset of like you can get a lot better, so like even if your pitch is perfect, maybe you can get even better.
Absolutely. And here is the point that I wanted to make. The organizations that I see succeed ultimately are the ones that are willing to change, are the ones that are willing to adapt, are the ones that are quick in adapting, and are the ones that, listen to other people. Now, not everything that people out there tell you is true, and you don't have to accept every advice, but reflect on the advice and then make a conscious call and deliberate choice on what am I going to change about my pitch, for instance. But that's a little example. Ultimately, we're talking business models. This goes, way beyond the pitch, and the ones that are willing to develop a solution in the dynamic, that want to remain relevant in a dynamic world, will have to change constantly, continuously over their development.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate your question. We're going through a process now where we're going to our portfolio companies and we're asking them what they need. If we've delivered what they need in terms of support, in terms of the type of funding, and in terms of access to markets and access to other funders. Because we were, it struck us that they're kind of standard ways of operating, and maybe we're making some assumptions. And it's also true that the kind of markets we're working in aren't like other VC, PE type situations, right? There are different things that are going on, different things that they may need. So we're asking them directly, and we're trying to adjust course on that basis.
Thank you. Yes, I'll take one or two last questions. I think I see, or comments.
Hi everyone, my name is Yiling. So I lead global programs at 500 Global. So I've overseen over 60 plus programs since I've joined 500 and worked with over almost 1,000 founders all around the world. I think what was interesting, a lot of the things that you share obviously is quite true about founders' appetite towards feedback and all. But what I thought was particularly interesting, and I wanted to double click on that a little bit, is with regards to partnerships and referrals. So you kind of mentioned that, and we're also in a situation whereby every time we enter a new country, a new region, we look for the local players there to refer startups to us. And for example, now that we are looking at the climate space, for example, which is new to us, we're also looking at people like, the Earthshot Prize, 100X Accelerator for referrals. I think the question I have is that you mentioned, that whole, we're only selecting the 10. You may be the 11 and the 12. How should we think about, will you refer the top 10 to us so that we can scale them up even further? Or should we actually be kind of spreading it around and have us maybe accelerate the 11 to 20, like putting aside commercial returns, right? But like, should we then be looking at the 11 to the 20th so that we can actually help accelerate more startups in the space?
No, it's a good point, and I think this is where like the sad truth is, like at some point, like you prioritize. We all, like, the day has limited hours, and so at some point you have very, very like detailed due diligence and like views about like the startups that are in your program. The others, like 11 to 30, like, and I'll be the first one to say, like, out of 1,000, there must be 30, 40, 50 of those startups that are really, really good, right? Like, so like this is where like getting from 20 to 10, that's the hardest part of actually doing that, right? And I think there's two completely conflicting aspects here. Like, one is, and this is where we are sitting, is like we want to create impact. And this is something we thought about a fair bit in terms of how do we create impact? Is actually by intentionally supporting the best teams having even more impact. rather than supporting those that are good but need more support. And that's unfair. It's unfair. A lot of times it's like, yes, and we're also aware that you might have the best startup idea, but you're not in the journey. You may be less developed. Therefore, we don't select you, right? Now, so that's one side of the answer. The other side is like there is a danger, and I agree to that. Is like where we all just support all the same startups all the time, and like we don't actually look at the good ones that are not in there, right? So I do agree. Like yes, you should look into others too, right? Like not just referrals. Including like, I think whenever somebody joins an accelerator or like a support program, or like you should be looking like, are we the right partners? Does it actually make sense? Do you need another accelerator, or are you actually just needing funding? Like, and that's also truth, right? Whereas like where funding is scarce, there is a case where funding is the bottleneck, right? Like that, I'll acknowledge that. I've seen this where people had really applied to accelerators despite they don't need an accelerator anymore. Then maybe another direction might be better.
I think one other way to look at it is maybe to have different types of incentives you provide to the organizations in your programs. So, because as you say, depending on the stage of development, depending on who else is funding them and helping them, you need to provide a unique benefit, right? You need to provide the thing that they need right here, right then from you. And usually what I then tell the organizations I work with is, like the social entrepreneurs, for instance, it's better that you tell the organization, and when you pitch to them, tell them, this is what I need specifically from you. I know I already participate in the WFP accelerator, but I'm coming to you because that's what I need. And often it's not just money, but we talked about connections, and there might be mentoring, there might be other ways to supporting these organizations.
Did I have a hand up there? I did. Sorry, he was before. But I'll take an extra question.
Hi, Augustin Fleury. I'm the Managing Director for Innovative Partnerships and Development Finance at Gavi. So I just want to
my boss, everyone.
Echo what was said about the non-financial support. Our innovation, early stage innovation program, Infuse, actually doesn't provide any cash to the innovators. What we offer them is, and so Signalytics, I was there at the workshop that chose them, and they were amazing. And what they are getting through us is, first of all, kind of being selected as an Infuse space setter, which is a signal to the market. We're also opening up country access to them. And then we have a network of investors that are interested in our Infuse program who invest money in them, and we also have leaders in different fields that want to partner with them and support them. And that's, we've had in the past some innovators telling us, what, there is no money? We try to be very clear about this. There is no money up front, but if you are there, what we're giving you is something else, and usually it works quite well for many of our innovators. And for instance, Zipline, which is kind of a long-standing partner, is bringing money to us. They raise money, and then we have a matching fund system where we match money that they bring to support immunization program, and they're actually bringing money to Gavi, which we are then matching to develop those kind of drone deliveries of vaccines. So I think the diversity of support is really, really critical, not just dollars, and opening doors as well. I really want to echo this. We've spoken to many innovators who've said sometimes just the one word, you're telling your friend, kind of, this is a really, really interesting company. We can't support them, but we would if we could, if we had 15 instead of 10, and that really, really helps.
Could you pass it to the gentleman in front of you who has the last?
Perfect. Hey, Manuel is my name. I'm running Empower Ventures, and we are a climate fintech startup in the energy space in Africa, and we are one of the 10 startups.
Yes, you are. I know.
For the IC award. We've raised about 10 million, both equity as well as debt, and especially the last investors, they're requiring impact reporting. And just from my own experience, this is becoming a challenge for us as a young company. I would even say sometimes it drives me crazy, because we have some investors, they want to have, these are the standards, this is what they need. So today, I can probably employ one full-time person just doing impact reporting. So question to you, all of you, do you see a trend of standardization where things are becoming easier?
Maybe, I mean, right now I think the trend really goes into like professionalization and like more sophistication, I would say, where a lot of people are like, we even have this where our funders all of a sudden like they will employ a third party like company that does the impact reporting, and then all of a sudden like it's like, well, but like I need to put this thing into this box because like, but then that makes no sense, but I still need to fill the box, otherwise the form doesn't get forward, right? So I think the sad part is like, I think it's driven by good intentions. I'm hopeful that people are listening to feedback as well. But like right now, it's rather going into more and more and more, and sometimes completely unrealistic things. Like where even it is easier with people who actually know what they're doing. It's harder with people that are fresh into the field, right? Like are fresh into like the topic, because like then they're saying, well, I want an impact study. Like in the field of development or humanitarian response, doing an impact study would be saying, I'm doing I do a blind test, like where I say like one village takes the startup, the other one doesn't, right? And like nobody wants to fund this. Like, or I shouldn't say nobody. Almost nobody wants to fund this. And like, so this is like, how can you ask for the data if you're not willing to fund it? Anyway, so to your question is like, I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful people will listen.
Maybe one of the foundations has an opinion here.
I shared my point before on the panel on the.
I think we people who work in the field or at the front end of all these processes and see what it takes. Also see what it takes to build an organization, to achieve growth. This is the last thing you want, all the bureaucracy, and then operate like a government, basically. So we are trying to raise awareness with the partners that we work with, but clearly the journey is still, long to change things that to the extent that will really make a difference for the startups.
I think if our session, it's time to close up. So if our session was about scaling in the age of AI, I guess AI isn't going to solve all our scaling problems, but maybe it will solve the problem of impact reporting. Maybe by next year in Davos we'll have an AI that can help with that, at least partially. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Our panelists, great, thank you, good job. And also everyone who stayed with us until the end. It feels dark outside, so there's this feeling of the end of the day. So I wish you a nice evening, and thank you for joining us.